So if Supercommittee members can't see fit to make a deadline and cut the spending, at least in one fell swoop, maybe 100 of their colleagues can give them an added incentive to cut the you-know-what. Connecticut Democratic Congressman Jim Hines and Republican Congressman Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania are leading a bipartisan push to not only meet that deadline and get more than $1 trillion for the next decade. These gentlemen want to get trillions more while they're at it. Gentlemen, good to have both of you. Congressman Hines, to you first. How do you get those extra trillions if they're having a devil of a time just coming up with $1 trillion?
Well, it's a very good question, and the fact is that we're, what are we, 10 days to go or so till they've got to report out. So, look, I think at this point what we're hoping for is that they do at least the $1.2 trillion, and then they set up a process. You called it a super committee, you know, a process to do something very, very complicated, which is to reform our tax code and also to deal in a fair and equitable way with the entitlements. That's not 10 days' work, but it's critical. You know, that $4 trillion is not a number that either one of us made up. That's a number that stabilizes our debt over time, and one way or another, we've got to get there.
You know, Congressman or Congressman Kelly, I should say, to balance this out,
yeah, Neil.
The criticism of this process is that you guys can change the rules, not you two individually, but there was talk today about the automatic backup cuts that take effect if these guys cannot reach an agreement, the so-called sequestration, that maybe they're going to push that deadline back or just drop it entirely, as the president has already indicated that those cuts are something that he would veto anyway. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, when I get back home and travel, and I'm sure Jim's the same way, people that we go and visit in our home district, what they keep wondering about all the time is you ask us to do things. You ask us to live within our means. You ask us to make cuts. You ask us to do difficult things, and you ask us to play by the rules. But then when it comes time for you to play by the rules, somehow Congress finds a way of getting around that. And I think what we have to do right now is we have to take a leadership position and really come up with common sense answers to a very real problem.
But they're not, guys. The fact of the matter is they're not. I know you're trying to exert a little bit of pressure here, but Congressman Hines, to you, I mean, many of your Democratic colleagues, for example, are loath to touch entitlements. Congressman Kelly, your colleagues, the Republicans, are loath to even address revenues in any way, shape, or form, and therein lies the rub and the standstill. So, Congressman Hines, do you think the Democrats should be more open to entitlement savings than they are?
Well, look, we have to be, right? These programs, and usually when you say that, you're referring to Medicare and Social Security. They are good programs that have done an awful lot of good over the generations for Americans. But because of the aging of the population and a bunch of other things, those programs will be reformed.
Yeah, but your colleagues don't want to touch it. They just say there's plenty else that you can touch. Don't touch that. You say what?
I'm sorry, Neil.
They say don't touch that. Leave it alone.
Yeah, well, look, that's just not a viable way of thinking about these things. You know, we shouldn't try to scare anybody. Social Security and Medicare are just fine in the near term. But in the long run, they've got very serious problems. And the question is, do we try to address them competently, smartly, and fairly now, or do we just, let more time pass so the problem becomes bigger? Not addressing these things is simply not an option. The question is, how do we do it and when?
Congressman Kelly, then to you, and at this point of revenues that a lot of your colleagues who have looked at even closing tax loopholes, ending credits, and the like that benefit a few, that's tantamount to a tax hike. So the more conservative elements within your party are loath to do that. Do you think they should?
Well, look, Neil, we all know we have to raise revenues. Now, how do you raise revenues? We've seen what's happened to our country. Look, in 2007, the World Bank, when they did the easiest place to start a business, the United States was third. Now we're 13th. So you've got to ask yourself, what's been going on? What's happened in these last 4 years? Why are we not able to get there? Raising revenues is the key. You don't want to touch rates. You don't need to raise rates to raise revenues. In my business, I'm an automobile guy. When times get really tough, the last thing I want to do is go out and raise the price on cars. We have to make it an easier place to do business, a more welcoming place.
But there are purists, sir, in your party who look at that as a tax hike, as a tax hike, as a tax hike. And if that's the way Mike Kelly's going, we really don't like Mike Kelly.
Well, you know what? They don't have to like Mike Kelly. I'll tell you what, the people that elected me to come here and do a job for the American people. They weren't worried about Republicans or Democrats or independents. They said, please get the country back on track. With Jim Renacci and some other people, we're really looking at what can we do best for America right now. That's the answer. Let's do what's best for America. Raising the revenues is easy to do from a standpoint, make it easier to do business, make it a better country to do business in. Don't got our regulations. Let's measure twice and cut once. You can only spend $1 once, so you got to be careful how you do it.
Well, I give you both credit because you're trying to move the ball forward. Over all this heat, you're just trying to move the ball forward. And for that, despite the details and people bicker with you on both sides, I give you a lot of credit and guts for that. So, gentlemen, very good seeing you. We wish you well.
We're going to work on it together.
All right, let us hope and pray, as they say.